Let's move on to our big topic of the week in group chat, and we are going to talk about Chris Brown.
Why?
Forever, ever, ever. Was that the right song?
I don't know.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us why, Devendra? You're the one who wrote the story.
So this week, Chris Brown woke up to a police standoff. Apparently, a woman who I don't think she's been named yet reported that Brown had pulled a gun on her, and the police kind of just set themselves up in front of his house. And he started posting Instagram videos, just kind of ranting against the police and how he's being treated. Meanwhile, outside, the standoff outside his house lasted like most of that day. Local news was there. People were, broadcasting stuff on Facebook Live. All at the same time, he was like responding on Instagram video. And it was just kind of an interesting back and forth, for a big media story like this. Yeah.
So I did find this sort of interesting and weird to watch it unfold. But one of the things that I wasn't quite sure of at first, and I kind of hear both of your takes on it, is Chris Brown's hardly the first celebrity to have run-ins with the law. He's hardly the first person to find himself splattered live on news networks as he encounters it. Obviously, the one that jumps out, at least in my mind, and I'm sure most people of a certain age's mind, is OJ and the White Bronco.
Well, that started our whole, the media culture we live in right now. That was the tipping point, right?
Yeah.
I was not alive, I'm sorry.
What?
No, for real. When was this?
Oh, my God.
In the 80s, 90s?
God. Let's take a pause.
I'm burying my head in my hands
Let's
again.
just,
Listen, I can't help that I'm young and talented.
I need to find out what year this was, because I actually don't remember off the
Pretty
top
sure
of my
it was
head.
the year I was born.
is that 92?
I think it is.
Oh, that's not the year I was born. But I was not old enough to be reading the news.
Maybe you should have been, Shirley.
No, what? You're saying that as
I'm sorry that there is so much.
94.
94.
Yeah. You're not that young, Shirley.
I
You're
was
not.
pretty young. I was barely. I read from a very young age, but I did not care about news when I was 7 years old.
Okay.
All right. So let's now that me and Devendra both feel old, again, there's a running theme on this podcast.
There's a reason I'm cranky editor.
Yeah.
And I'm contrarian.
What kind of made this different? The Chris Brown thing different than OJ and other coverage that we've seen before?
I think mainly that he was responding, and almost not quite in real time. It wasn't Instagram live video or anything, but he was responding to things that were happening. And I think he was also watching the news and seeing how people were reporting on him. So that back and forth was kind of fascinating too. I mean, during the OJ car chase, at one point, I forget who it was, his friend AJ, I think, who was actually driving the car. The police called him. And some of those calls, I think, were also broadcast. So there was some back and forth there, but it's just funny how much you have a phone. It's basically a whole production studio for you to rail back at the media or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that this kind of lends us the perspective of the other person, the other side, the side that the media circus doesn't get to see, right? What it feels like to be at the center of it.
It gives you a direct line to the person on the other side of that police.
And even though he wasn't the most articulate in any of those videos, it was kind of terrifying to imagine yourself in his position,
Sure.
especially if you think yourself innocent. I feel like I would have done that.
Yeah.
I would have been periscoping the crap out of that.
Yeah.
Or Facebook living, whatever.
Yeah. And he's not the first person to do that. It's a growing trend we've kind of seen. In the immediate aftermath of Philando Castile, Diamond Reynolds broadcasted on Facebook Live, and I guess that was sort of the first big one we saw, right? That was the first one that really went
I think so.
huge.
But that was after videos after the fact, or videos released after the fact that were taken.
Right, it's not live
and things as well,
video, right?
Yeah. But increasingly, it seems like people on that other side of the law enforcement divide are taking to social media and taking to the internet to show their side of the story.
Yep.
To their benefit or detriment, perhaps, in the case of Chris Brown.
Sure.
But this is a growing trend, I think.
I'm sorry, and I was laughing because I just saw what comes next in the script. I know this is all scripted, guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, I doubt people out there assume that we're sitting down here and literally just making this all up off the top of our head. We do come in with a plan for what we want to talk about, believe it or not.
That's why we have our laptops here.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're not nerds. But the thing I saw next was that so putting people behind the camera to show their perspective is very interesting when they're actually people of note. But some people are just going to take to Periscope for anything.
That's most of live video right now, right?
Yeah.
That's why most live video content is garbage unless something
It encourages
happens.
a sense of self-importance.
Yep.
That is kind of a problem of this generation. It's I find that people, and they're going to hate me for this, are very like self-important and very entitled and believe they deserve a whole bunch of things. And this is a whole other topic that we should talk about later.
Yeah.
I wonder if putting these tools or the proliferation of these tools is actually making it worse.
I think that is a rabbit hole we could go down.
So many.
Yes.
But there's an example.
But kind of related to that, right? Yeah, it may be turning people into like narcissists or something, but on the occasion there is an event that ends up being important. Oh, all of a sudden, the fact that you have the technology to do this so easily, I know it's kind of fascinating. So we gain a lot.
But it also makes people a little bit less helpful, which, I mean, there always is a problem for like photojournalists, right? When you're at an event where someone's being harmed, do you photograph it or do you help?
You don't want to be like the Seinfeld finale, right? Where you're there just taking a video of the experience.
Haven't seen the finale.
Oh my God.
I'm actually.
Were you live for that, Sherland?
I was alive for it, but I kind of don't like Seinfeld. So
I like Seinfeld. I'm all caught up to
Seinfeld's
like
perfect.
the last 2 seasons. But anyway,
You're all caught up.
I'm all caught up.
I have a feeling that actually instead of the Dead or Alive stuff, I'm going to get the most hate mail about not watching Seinfeld.
Yes.
Basically, because
Yes.
you're an old white man. Anyway,
New Yorker.
New Yorker
Yeah.
too. So, but the thing is, like, I don't want to. I feel like this will result in that kind of an issue where you're at a fire and people need help, but your first instinct isn't to maybe.
We've
call
seen
for
that
a fire.
happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, and that's not good.
But is there not something to be said though about whether or not this encourages people to document instead of help and participate, which I think is a very real concern.
Yeah.
But is there also not something to say about the fact that this perhaps builds an expectation of transparency that didn't exist before, and gives you a glimpse into people's lives and another point of view that didn't exist before that happened?
I mean, sorry to be really trashy and into celeb gossip, but when Kim Kardashian, pulled out that Snapchat video that showed like incriminating evidence of Taylor Swift saying, approving the song lyrics that Kanye wrote, that was like kind of transparent, but in a weird way, and that like made Taylor Swift look really bad and kind of pulled down her whole facade of being a nice girl. So I agree, and I like not the expectation of transparency. I think we should always support transparency. I'm a big fan of that. I just wonder if at a certain point it gets to be too personal.
Yeah, I mean, but the reason we're also seeing all the reports of police brutality now isn't the fact that this stuff just started happening, right?
Yeah, true.
This is how the world has been, and we, like most people, either didn't know or we didn't know the extent to which it was happening.
Yep.
So I think in that vein, like that transparency has been helpful.
I think that's right, and then that's where the documentation helps, because we wouldn't have known of a lot of these issues happening if someone hadn't been there with a live camera streaming straight out of there. So,
And I think one of the things that kind of straddles this line between the expectation of transparency and pushing that forward, and also that self-importance, is Kim.com and his.
and that's why I laughed just now.
Yeah. Which and understandably so. So do you want to tell us what's going on with Kim.com,
No.
since you don't want to
I just
laugh?
think it's ridiculous. Just go ahead.
So he demanded and apparently was granted the ability to live stream the appeal of his extradition hearing.
It's pretty cool.
I'm not super familiar with the semantics of what was granted. Is he going to live stream it himself, or has someone set up something for him?
I mean, I assume he's not going to be able to
Right.
live stream it himself.
That'd be weird.
Isn't he banned from the internet?
He
Or something.
probably is. I'm not going to lie. I'm not super up on my Kim.com. I probably should have read this a little bit closer before coming on the
Guys, we
show.
had
All we
too much to
know
do
is,
right before this.
was it approved? Because I know the judge was considering.
It was approved. He will be allowed to stream his extradition appeal. So, I mean, it is sort of interesting, though. I mean, regardless of the fact that he is a megalomaniac with an absurd sense of self-importance.
One of the world's top Call of Duty players. Yeah.
All right.
He is.
Is that a thing?
It's a thing. Like there was a
Listen.
point where he was like waiting between trials where he just rose up the ranks and became like number one.
Interesting.
In some Call of Duty games. He had a lot of free time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably. But it does. it is sort of interesting, I think, and it does speak to this expectation of transparency and how live video and live streaming and internet video in general has kind of pushed us to expect this. Now you're going to be able to see the legal proceedings that will either lead to him being sent back to the U.S. to face conspiracy, racketeering, and money laundering charges, or to remain safe and sound with, where is he? New Zealand? Yes, New Zealand.
Right? I mean, this is probably the closer OJ correlation now.
I think so,
because,
too.
like, the recording and the way the OJ trial was actually spun out to the media, well, that was a big change for us. And trials didn't used to be entertainment. At the same time, C-SPAN, like, airs all sorts of things, like government hearings and sometimes trials, too, right? So it's not like this is super new. The fact that it's being broadcast through the internet, I guess, is notable.
Yeah. And the other thing that sort of struck me about this, and there are children apparently.
If you guys hear kids screaming, it's not me.
Over.
I'm
It's
not that
over.
young.
I'm assuming it's Bring Your Child to Work Day or something.
Oh, Lord.
But the other thing that struck me sort of interesting is that everybody watched the other side of the Chris Brown stuff on Facebook Live.
Oh, yeah.
So everybody went and watched, traditional news coverage.
Yep.
But they watched it on Facebook Live instead of on cable. And they did the same thing fairly recently with the Trump Tower climber.
Yep.
Although those were both local newscasts
On Facebook
broadcasting to Facebook,
Yep.
but they were also broadcasting on their website and also like occasionally on their own channels too. So it was just spreading out the streams that were already there.
And trying to capture as much of an
Yeah.
audience as they can.
Yeah, thirsty for
Yep.
page views or whatever.
Well, I mean, it does facilitate easier sharing if you're streaming this direct to
Yes.
Facebook, though,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just become the platform of choice, right? So it used to be their own channel, used to be maybe your website, maybe your own app or something. Now Facebook has just kind of taken that role. Yeah.
I mean, I think this is probably a bigger issue, but I think that a lot of media is moving towards social media and like broadcasting directly to Facebook Live. Eventually, all are like, certain
Yeah.
publications that I shall not name are basically going to keep publishing content through all these channels, and then the rest of their site's going to lose traffic, but then
Yep.
as are we.
This
and
is
then
a big danger.
Yeah.
Big danger.
It's
a
that
huge
that
downer.
off-platform views
Yeah.
and all those buzzwords and all that
More
media
behind
nonsense.
the scenes stuff, guys.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But I mean, I do think it's kind of fascinating to watch this sort of shift
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
Facebook Live in particular, because I think a lot of us, or at least I did. You can say if you disagree with me. I just when Facebook Live launched, I looked at it and I went, same thing you kind of said, which is like, oh, great, another way for like vain, self-important people to overshare on a social network.
AKA me.
I mean, it's fine.
Let's be real.
I've
I've
used,
seen Sherlyn's Snapchats, yeah.
Wait, what? Anyway.
but it seems like it's kind of actually turning into like a legitimate way to deliver news, which I at least wasn't expecting.
Well, it's more like Facebook has the numbers, right? They have over 1 billion users. When you're a platform that big, like you give people a platform to put their voices out there, and when you're that big, yeah,
Facebook
interesting things will happen.
It's its own country.
But I'm also so worried about like the dominance of Facebook and the killing of the open web and things like that. Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's probably as good a place as any
Yeah.
to end it.
Oh
Yeah,
God.
that is a solid concern and another rabbit hole we could disappear down that we will save for another episode.
Wow.
Okay.
So thank you, Sherlyn Devendra, for joining me. Where can the fine people find you on the internets?
Don't find me. Just don't. Okay, at Sherlyn though, whatever. Fine.
Devendra.
I'm at Devendra on Twitter, and I podcast about movies and TV at /film.com.
All the shameless self-plugging.
Yeah, that's what this is for.
Really?
That's how it
Okay.
works.
Yeah. So
You
if
guys
you've
are
got
so
things you want to
shameless.
plug,
Your
you have
face.
wow.
Check out Sherlyn's SoundCloud channel.
Oh God, you're such a stalker. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
You tweet it.
That's true. Don't follow me on Twitter. Just don't.
You can't. Yeah.
Is the SoundCloud just you?
No,
threat-
SoundCloud. Just no.
Okay.
It's just like Sherlyn's like, everyone's always against me every day.
Just lots of threats.
I'm gonna
Just,
make
like,
a rap
vague
song
threats.
about how Terrence sucks.
Please.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yo,
please do.
yo, yo.
You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Terrence O'Brien. Lots of E's, no A's. please send us feedback, send us questions, comments, concerns. We want to make this show enjoyable for you. You can hit us up on Twitter @Engadget, email us at podcast@Engadget, or just send all of your hate mail direct to Sherlyn.
No, Terrence.
Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to rate us on iTunes, and don't miss next week's episode. We'll be coming to you from San Francisco following the Apple event. We'll be talking iPhone. We'll be talking Sony. It's going to be a lot of fun. But before we go, I want to leave you with the comment of the week, which comes from Joer80. Back to watching the Kardashians.
And I shall.
Seems like a really good use of time.
Just for you.
Yeah, I love it, actually.